So last night I was reading and I came across some articles about reparations, and I came across the stats that say that 85% of white America are opposed to giving people of color reparations. Of course, it's the excuse of, well, people of color aren't slaves today. I didn't have slaves, so why do I have to pay? Then I read some other articles about America's history of giving reparations to the Japanese during World War II, Native Americans, how those that suffered the Holocaust have also received reparations. And I thought, well, a lot of people that are saying, well, I wasn't here for that. Why do I have to pay? Well, you weren't here for those things either. Many of you. But we paid. Maybe you or your family members didn't take part in the atrocities that happened to those groups of people. But we didn't oppose paying. You don't see the problem with that?
So here's the question. One, do black people deserve to be paid reparations? Be it monetary compensations in form of reparation for their years of, should I say service or labor, but their years of slavery in America? That's one of the questions. And the second question is, who is to benefit from these reparations? Okay? Being that my great-grandfather or my forefathers as a black person is dead, the people who really, faced the slavery and all of that, maybe they are dead. Do I deserve to collect these reparations on behalf of, my family or my great-grand or forefather who suffered this reparation? And these are questions that are left unanswered, right? But so many people are giving their opinions about this. And right now, I think some persons are beginning to conform to a positive response. Lately, some white folks are beginning to make sense out of this. Some of them are beginning to support this whole thing. Let's dive into the video and see what some persons have to say for this. If you've not subscribed, this is the right time to subscribe. Do well to subscribe to my channel and keep your comments coming. I need to hear your opinion on the comment section, okay?
How do I feel about reparations for black Americans? I feel that if the government isn't going to settle its debt, there is no hope for this country. Until we reconcile the balance sheet for all the stolen lives, stolen labor, and the fact that this country got to skip all of the growth years to become an economic superpower on the backs of enslaved black Americans, until we honor the treaties in the sacred land of the indigenous and hold true to the word that we gave, a treaty which is supposed to supersede even the Constitution, there's no hope for unity. America loves to pride itself on this idea that it's a country that keeps its word. Its handshake is as good as its signature on a contract, but our signature on a contract is no good. And until we deal with those things, we will just be stuck microscopically moving the needle towards equity, but we can never get there until those things are done.
Absolutely, I support reparations for the descendants of enslaved Africans in America. As a white man running for governor, I recognize the deep scars left by slavery and the ongoing systemic racism that continues to affect the black communities. It's not just about acknowledging the past, it's about taking concrete steps to address the economic and social inequalities that persist today. As governor, I'll make it my mission to ensure that black residents of West Virginia, especially those who are descendants of enslaved Americans, receive reparations. This is about justice, about making things right, about helping our state heal and move forward together. And let's take a cue from California. They're leading the charge with innovative approaches to reparations, setting up structures to determine eligibility and ensure fairness. We can learn from their example and tailor a program that fits West Virginia's unique needs and history. This isn't a formal policy speech. This is just me talking to you heart to heart. It's time for change, and I'm committed to being a part of that change. Let's work together to create a future where everyone has the opportunity to thrive. It's the least we can do, and it's long overdue.
I 100% agree that the United States owes the black community reparations, and this is why. It's not about white people owing black people. It's not about white people being punished for the sins of our ancestors. In fact, it's quite the opposite. It's about white people standing in solidarity with a community that has suffered grave, egregious injustices at the hands of the United States government. But first, we must decenter ourselves in this conversation, alienate ourselves from our privilege, and hold the United States institutions and systems accountable for the wrongs that they never rectified. From slavery to black codes, to convict leasing, to Jim Crow segregation, to anti-black housing policies, to mass incarceration, we have never rectified our wrongs as a country. If you look at our criminal justice system, 1 in 3 black males carry convicted felon label. That is a real stat. Is it because they're inherently evil, or they just need more personal accountability, or is there something larger at play? All the data shows by every statistical measure the black community has been disproportionately impacted by every institution or system in the United States, from education to healthcare to criminal justice system to banking to housing, which we still have de jure segregation in effect today. And when it comes to housing, neither parties are absolved from this, because both parties were responsible for the de jure segregation that we see today. The New Deal by Franklin Roosevelt didn't invent the segregationist practice of housing, but it did institutionalize it. Restricting access to capital for black families while enriching white families, the big reason why we see the generational wealth gap we see today. And remember, public housing wasn't initially for poor people, it was for working class white families. But because of laws and policies implemented by the United States government, it reinforced segregation, because public housing was to reflect the racial composition of the existing neighborhood. We had redlining and gentrification of neighborhoods, the residual effects of all these policies that we still see today. Reparations is about rebuilding and investing in the black community. Our government was held accountable to some extent for the grave injustices that we committed, the atrocities that we committed against Native Americans. We were also held accountable for the Japanese internment camps. But the United States government never made good on its 40 acres and a mule to the black community. Everybody else got paid. The United States was held accountable for these injustices. I'm a convicted felon. I had to pay a debt to society, to the United States government, to the state of Florida, for the crimes that I committed. I was held accountable. To this day, my past is still being used against me. In fact, if I were to go before a judge today, the first thing he would do is bring up my past and say it's probably a pretty good indicator of what my future will be. But we don't keep that same energy for our government. We don't hold them to the same level of accountability and to the same level of scrutiny. So if you're thinking to yourself, I don't know anybody, you're absolutely right. But our government does. And as citizens of the United States who uphold the Constitution, it is our duty, it is our responsibility to hold our government accountable. As taxpayers, as citizens of the United States, we all pay, not just white people. Anytime there's an injustice in the United States by a government agency, whether it's the police department, sheriff's department, any government agency, the taxpayers are always the ones that foot the bill. Why? Because in America, we believe in justice, or at least we say we do. No matter what side of the aisle you're on, I'm sure we can all agree that our government is corrupt. Stop allowing them to make us turn on each other. What better way to stand in solidarity with our brothers and sisters than to advocate to make right what has been wrong and never been rectified? People ask me all the time, what are my solutions to the problems that I speak on? Well, I can assure you that this would be a step in the right direction. This is the pathway forward. Reparations in America today.
When white people in the United States balk at the idea of paying reparations to black Americans who descended from slaves, they disagree with the Bible. Reparations are a form of compensation or restitution made to those who have suffered injustice particularly those in cases of racial inequality, discrimination, and slavery. The idea of paying reparations to Black Americans is not a new one. It has been a topic of discussion for decades, if not centuries. However, it has gained renewed attention and support in recent years, following the resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement and the growing recognition of systemic racism in American society. As a Christian, I believe that reparations are not only a matter of justice and equity, but also a reflection of God's character and values. In the Bible, we see numerous examples of God's concern for the oppressed, the marginalized, and the downtrodden. From the Israelites' liberation from slavery in Egypt to the ministry of Jesus among the poor and the outcast, we see a consistent theme of God's love for those who are on the margins of society. One of the key biblical principles that underlie the idea of reparations is the concept of restitution. In the book of Leviticus, we see God commanding the Israelites to make restitution to those whom they have wronged. Leviticus 6:1-5 says, "If anyone sins and commits a breach of faith against the Lord by deceiving his neighbor in a matter of deposit or security or through robbery, or if he has oppressed his neighbor or has found something lost and lied about it, swearing falsely in any of all the things that people do and sin thereby, if he has sinned and has realized his guilt and will restore what he took by robbery when he got it by oppression or deposit that was committed to him, or the lost thing that he found, or anything about which he has sworn falsely, he shall restore in full and shall add a fifth to it and give it to him to whom it belongs on the day that he realizes his guilt." This passage emphasizes the importance of making restitution to those who have been wronged, and not just restoring what was taken, but adding to it as a form of compensation. This principle of restitution can be applied to the issue of reparations to Black Americans who have suffered centuries of enslavement, discrimination, and systemic oppression. Another biblical principle that supports the idea of reparations is the concept of Jubilee. In Leviticus 25, God commands the Israelites to observe a Jubilee every 50th year, during which all debts are forgiven, all slaves to be set free, and all property to be returned to its original owners. This was a radical idea of economic justice designed to prevent the accumulation of wealth and power in the hands of a few, and to ensure that all members of society had equal access to resources and opportunities. The idea of Jubilee can be seen as a model for reparations in that it seeks to address the root causes of inequality and oppression rather than just treating the symptoms. By forgiving debts, freeing slaves, and returning property, Jubilee seeks to create a more just and equitable society, one in which everyone has the opportunity to flourish. As a Christian, I believe paying reparations to Black Americans is only a matter of justice and equity, but also it is a reflection of God's values and character. Through the biblical principles of restitution and Jubilee, we see a model for how we can address the historical and systemic injustices that have plagued our society for far too long. While the issue of reparations is complex and contentious, I believe that as Christians, we have a responsibility to seek justice.
True. Not one Black person alive today was enslaved in America. That is true. Black people are wanting free stuff. Okay, I don't know. I want free stuff, so I guess white people want free stuff too. Reparations isn't about someone who had been enslaved and now is not enslaved. We had a chance to do that and we blew it back in the 1880s and 90s. So 40 acres and a mule, for some it was more, for some it was less. 40 acres and a mule is what was promised to those working on plantations. That never happened. Then sharecropping. Then all the Jim Crow. All of those things prevented Black Americans from establishing any kind of generational wealth. up and until the Civil Rights Act. Now, we can argue for a really long time that the Civil Rights Act didn't clear everything up. It didn't. But at least it was now illegal to discriminate. So I want you to think about if your family and ancestors had to start at 1964, where you and your family would be today. How would you have paid for college? Would your family have been able to help you with that? Where would you have lived? Reparations is about making up for what wasn't given then, which could have propelled that community into wealth today. We are finally seeing Black Americans with multi-generational wealth starting to emerge, and it's only going to keep on going, and that's great. But what reparations does is it makes up for the fact that you had all these enslaved Americans, and then, okay, you're free, with nothing. Starting from scratch in a system where they weren't even counted as a full human being, where they were limited in what jobs they could have. They didn't have access to Social Security. Now we have Civil Rights Act, 1964. Everyone has equal rights. So imagine if that's where your ancestors were starting. That's why reparations are important. And that's why I think we're remiss now for not taking a serious look at reparations and how we're going to do that. I know people get all hung up on, how do you prove that your ancestors were enslaved? Okay, how about we give low interest mortgages, interest-free mortgages, free college, and maybe that's the free stuff you're talking about, but that will only better our community. So what's the problem? I don't get what the problem is. So educate me.
All right, before we continue with the conversation, I think we're all in agreement that Black people slaved for America. That is a common understanding. We agree on that, right? Okay, now, the questions are, do they deserve reparations? And you can draw your answers from every, similar situations, even if they are not as bad as it happened in America. But let's say similar situations. Most recent situations, you can take that answer from the Japanese, they got reparations. You take the answer from the Jews after the Second World War, they got reparations. And so why not the Black folks in America? Don't they deserve reparations? And some persons, misinterpret these discussions and these topics. They misinterpret reparations. Some of them thinks that it's about, trying to get money from white people, or each family has to pay. No, I don't think you understand it. It's about the government, because at some point, this slavery was a government thing. It was an institution. It was run by the government, all right, regulated by the government. So if anybody deserves to pay, it's the government, okay? It's not like we're saying everybody, each household or each family, you're supposed to pay this. No, that's not what anybody is talking about here. Now, that's that. Okay, now, also the question is, who is to take this money, okay? So to better understand this situation, I want us to use a reference, all right? Now, let's take, for example, that, the government owes my grandfather money, and years went by, and then my grandfather is dead, and eventually, there's no dispute that the government owes my grandfather money, okay? And now, eventually, we're talking about paying back this money, and you're in doubt, or the government is now questioning if the money should be, or the reparation should be paid to me, since my grandfather is dead. Oh, you want to forfeit the money because my grandfather is dead? Hell no, you pay to the family, all right? If it's possible for you to trace the ancestral lineage of people, way back to BC and all of that, it's not difficult to equally trace the ancestral lineage of these Black folks in America. You can trace them, and pay the reparation. It's not like it's something you don't know how to do, but I think the issue is people are trying to divert attentions and trying to make issues where there are no issues. But it's very good that some of these white folks are beginning to reconcile themselves with these ideas. So sometimes when I hear people say things like, everybody who suffered from slavery or who were enslaved are no longer alive. There's no one alive today that was enslaved. Yes, you're right. But do they also know that there are nobody who enslaved that is alive today, but you are benefiting from the profiteers of those slavery? The profit made from those slavery by your forefathers, you're still benefiting from it now, and that it has turned a long chain of family wealth, ancestral wealth. Those are money that was profited from this slavery, these enslaved people, okay? And you're still living on it till now. So what gives you the right to talk about the family of these persons who were slaves? Where do you derive your morality from to say that they equally don't deserve reparations from the sufferings of their forefathers? You see, there's a breach in morality there, and whatever gives you that opinion. If you are eligible to benefit from the wealth that was profited from slavery, you don't think you deserve, or I deserve, to be paid reparations for my father or my ancestors who equally suffered, who made that wealth for you, suffered without payment? So I think we should at least join our voices with the voice of these white folks who are able to identify these truths, because most persons wouldn't want to face these facts, but some of them are facing the fact, they are saying the truth. So we appreciate you, we support you, we render our voices to you. Okay, so I think black folks shouldn't relent in making these views. They should not relent. Everybody should speak out to this until the goal is achieved, because the inequality factor is evident. All right. So tell me on the comment section if you think Black Americans deserve reparations. Credit to our creators whose content are on this video. I'll see you guys on the next video. Do well to like, share, and subscribe.